Oh man, Fractal is back today with a case that I've personally been waiting on for a very long time. This takes the wide open airflow and front geometry of one of my favorite cases of all time, the Meshify C, and combines it with all the internal functionality of the Define 7 that we looked at back in February. The result is a high performance airflow case that's extremely versatile and an absolute dream to build in. There's a reason why one of my personal builds is always in a Fractal design case. They do it really right, and the Meshify 2 is no exception. We're going to talk about why. You ready? Let's go! Yo, I'm Brian P. You're watching Bad Seed Tech, and today we're checking out the Meshify 2 high-performance airflow case from Fractal Design. Full transparency, Fractal did send this case out for review, but as you should know by now, doesn't affect my review in any way. Honestly, I was gonna buy it anyway. So the Meshify 2 as shown today is priced at $139.99 for the US market. It's available in 3 colors, black, white, and gray, which is like a gunmetal. I definitely would not have picked this color, but this is what they sent, and I'm so glad that they did. It looks amazing, and the finish is stunning. So a lot of the revisions we're gonna see today are based around the Define 7, because the last mid-size Meshify was an S2 variant. If you're coming from that Meshify S2, which I've never personally owned, this thing is a light years leap forward. So I think the better comparison is this versus the Define 7. I will link my full review of the Define 7 down in the description, and we'll talk about important differences along the way. So the most obvious thing here is the front panel. This thing is all mesh, all airflow, and if you grow weary of keeping brushed aluminum clean, this one's for you. Underneath, you'll find the pull for the full-length lower dust filter. The logo here is raised, and turns out it's a handle for the mesh portion to swing open, revealing a dust filter inside. Nylon this time, like the others, not the foam backing that we've seen before. This doesn't swing open far enough to fully remove the filter, so the entire door just pops in and out from the hinges. It's not my favorite solution. I feel like I might break it every time I reseat the mesh panel, so luckily I won't be doing this often. If you like to live dangerously, you can pull the filter out entirely for increased airflow. In case you'd like to remove this entire assembly, that's easy enough, and the I/O is now attached to the chassis itself instead of the bezel, so you can now remove it without being tethered by I/O cables. I/O has been revised slightly. Audio jacks are split out, power switch and the LED are like the square now, and you get 2 USB 3 ports up there and an included 3.1 Gen 2 Type-C with fast charging. Side panels have the same easy release, one-hand removal we saw on the 7, basically just 4 slots in the lower portion and the simple plastic clip. When I reviewed the 7, I doubted the longevity of this clip, but it hasn't proved to be an issue over the past few months at all. You can mix and match any variation of light or dark tint, tempered glass, or solid panels if you're willing to spring for the extra accessories. Top panel gets the mesh treatment as well, and I think it's a much cleaner look than the airflow panel on the Define 7. No more push button, just a simple handle, whole thing just pops right off. Underneath we have another full-length nylon dust filter as well. Under that, we have the removable cooling bracket. This allows you to lift out roughly 2/3 of the entire roof, so you can complete your radiator or fan assembly outside of the case itself. I'm a big fan of cases that have open roof access like this, not only because you can put together your fan and your radiator outside, but because having access to the full interior when you're building is a godsend, especially like around that 8-pin CPU power connector up there in the corner. It's a nightmare to work on cases that don't have this. I've been totally spoiled by this functionality. Inside, we've got the same convertible dual layout design that debuted on the R6 and was revised in the Define 7. A really important note here is that there is no support for an optical drive on this case. This is one of those old holdover features that does still exist in the 7 and the 7 XL, so if that's something you need specifically for your workflow or your build, you need to go that way instead. This comes in the open configuration by default because, you know, airflow, but you can swap this layout to accommodate the 4 included 2.5 and 3.5 drive trays. You also have 2 in the lower cage in the basement. That can be removed completely if you need to. That gives you 11 total 3.5 drive locations. You also see the multi-mount returning here that can hold drives or a pump res combo. There's various locations all over the case that fit this. You can basically just slap stuff everywhere if you want. You get 2 2.5-inch drive trays as well. They're located on the rear of the motherboard tray by default, but can also be used on the top of the shroud. Of course, additional drive trays are available as aftermarket accessories. This is a case where you will never be short on drive space, ever. It supports a max of 18 different locations with support for 9 included in the box. You also get 9 fan locations. That's 3 in the front, 3 in the top, 2 in the basement, and 1 in the rear. These are all 120 or 140 millimeter locations, and you'll get 3 140 millimeter 1000 RPM GP14 fans included. They're good enough for included fans, but there's definitely higher end options out there. Rad support for days too. 420 in the roof, 360 in the front if you pull the shroud inlays, and 280 in the basement, which should be an easier install thanks to this modesty panel, which is also great for people like me who are trash at cable management. Also on that back panel, you have all of Fractal's amazing cable routing channels, tie down spots, Velcro straps, and their Nexus 2 Slim PWM fan hub. This thing is nice, great location, it's tucked up and out of the way. It's another thing that will spoil you once you go back to a case without this. As expected, I didn't really run into any issues with the build. Since I am transferring my personal build into this case, I opted to populate all the fan positions in the front and run the open config. You'll also see I'm using the Fractal Celsius Plus on the 3900X. That's not for the branding or for the video, it's because it's one of the few coolers that performs well that doesn't need its own control software. Though given the amount of available rad space up there, I can definitely see myself going with the 280 or 360 in time. The slots in the back are now bridgeless, which makes for a much cleaner look and sometimes better accessibility to the ports on your GPU. Since you get 2 vertical GPU slots, I did have an option to run Fractal's new vertical GPU kit, the Flex B20. I'm generally not a fan of these things, but this is a beefier kit with a support bracket to give you a little more peace of mind. I opted not to go this way because the install interferes with my capture card and because this Asus TUF 3080 is a very thick boy and I was afraid it was going to run it too close to the glass. Motherboard in here is the X570 Aorus Master, standard ATX. This case will accommodate eATX, though it's going to compromise a lot of the grommets. Anything bigger, like some of the larger X399 boards, and you'll need to move into one of the XL size cases. One of the complaints I had on the 7 was that the 3.5-inch drive trays in the basement felt pretty sus. They were hard to get in and out. They have definitely corrected that here. Overall, I'm really happy with how everything came together in this build. Stress tested, I didn't have any issues with temps or noise, which is to be expected with this pretty minimal build in that open configuration. Even though silence isn't really the mission for an airflow case like this, I did find it kind of odd that the rear panel lacked any sound dampening material like we usually see from them. I'm always impressed with the smart details we see from Fractal. My only real gripe with this case is that certain aspects of the build quality don't always feel quite up to the same level as the design. It's not poor by any means, it's just that certain things like drive cages are a little fiddly, the way the screws line up with some of the modular stuff doesn't really hit 100%. You have some weird paint stuff on some of the trays, nothing that's visible from the outside though. Still, at 140 bucks, I love this. I would gladly spend my own money on this. You can build whatever crazy build you want down to the very specific detail, and then a couple months later completely change your mind, put a totally different system, whole different goals in there, and utilize the same case. The functionality, the versatility, the modularity on these things, it's crazy. And I'm very happy to have that mesh geometric panel back in the studio. Links down in the description along with any info on availability. As always, any questions, hit me in the comments or come find me on Twitter. And that's it for this time. I'm Brian P. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit that sub button, and until next time, stay up.